Hello and welcome to another video tutorial for Scratch for Taz McCarthy, this one on more advanced scrolling techniques. This video has been made by request from several people asking how this game here functions. This is a Metal Gear Solid inspired game, and basically from the top down view it achieves the effect where the background is scrolling. Now these enemies are also scrolling with the background into set positions, which was quite difficult to do. And you get the idea. So basically there's detection, so the character can't travel through walls, and some of the levels the characters actually pace back and forth and they move relative to the character in the background moving. So to create this type of background scrolling is actually fairly simple. Here I've set up a little demonstration of how it works. You have your main character, which always stays in the middle of the screen, so we set it to X and Y 0, 0 at the start, and then the only controls on it are to turn left and right when those keys are pressed. Something to point out is that the three different settings here, we need to make sure this one is set to can rotate, because if we enable these scripts we can see the difference here. When it's set to can rotate, it means it can rotate around in any direction. If you set a sprite to only left and right, it'll decide only left or right, or if you set it to don't rotate, no matter which way it's facing, as indicated by this little blue line and our direction here, the sprite actually won't change its direction. So our character that we want to appear to be moving around needs to be able to rotate, but then our actual background, which we're scrolling underneath it, needs to be locked in, so no matter which way it's facing, it always looks the same way up. So this background script, it's important to note that it's not actually on the stage. It's a separate sprite above the stage and can be moved around like so. This background sprite also starts at 0, 0, and then basically we tell it to point in whatever direction our main character, in which case, in this case the helicopter, is facing. So if we start the game, you'll see up here this background is changing to face the exact same direction as the helicopter here, even though it's locked in to not look like it's rotating, it still has a direction. Then we tell it on the background, every time we press up, to move steps, either backwards or forwards. So as we rotate the helicopter, the background also changes its direction, so now we get that scrolling effect. In the Metal Gear Solid game, to make that work a little bit better, we increased the size of the background to 150%, therefore giving us more to work with, whereas when it's on only 100% you get off the edge very quickly. But by expanding it to 150, which seems to be the maximum Scratch will allow, we've got the situation where we can actually have a decent sized area to scroll across. Another type of scrolling is to have just left and right or up and down. So instead of being able to turn to any direction you want, this is more like a traditional platformer. So to do this we create a variable. One for this example just has left and right scrolling, so we have a scroll X. If you're going to do up and down scrolling, you would have a scroll Y as well. When the game starts, that's set to 0, and then our arrows are just making that number go up and down, as we can see here. Basically, this is going to keep track of the position of all of our different background pieces. So once again, they're not on the stage is empty. These are our different, almost like background tiles that we're going to get to move along. They've got pretty much exactly the same script. It's going to set their Y to 0, and it's going to set their X to whatever scroll X is set to, and then this common factor. 480 is the width of the stage in Scratch, and this second number here is going to change for each one. So the first one is 0, so 480 times 0 is 0, so the first one's set to just scroll X. The second one is set to scroll X plus 480, so therefore it's going to be 480 to the side of the first one. The next one times 2, so this one's going to be 960 to the side. The next one is times 3, and the next one times 4, and you repeat that for as many as you have. So let's have a test here. When I press the keys, you can see that we have some fairly decent scrolling going back and forth. So this sum here basically puts them all in a row, offsetting them. And as we move, we scroll back and forth. Now you might notice some tearing there. This is a limitation of Scratch. It finds it very hard to move the two things at the exact same time. The only real way to overcome this is to make it so your game scrolls slower than you might like. So if we put this down to 5, it minimizes it, and the smaller the number, the less we're asking it to do, and the smoother it should work each time. If you're going to have up and down scrolling as well, you simply make a second variable, and then for each of these it's going to be something like this. Set Y to our second variable, and we can copy this from here, except instead of 480 it's going to be the height, which is 360, and of course instead of X it's going to be Y, and you would have this in here as well. And then back on our character we would have it so the up arrow changes the scroll Y and the down arrow changes the scroll Y, and we would have 4 controls here. One other thing in this Metal Gear Solid game is the color detection for walking through the walls. Basically on our main character we've got 2 things that it's checking. When the up arrow is pressed, it's also checking for colors touching the grey walls. So basically unless colors on the sprite are touching the grey, then it won't send the signal to go forward or backwards, and that signal is received by the backgrounds here. Slightly more advanced version of our demonstration. Basically on our sprite, if we blow it right up, the forward color detection is set to the head, and the backwards color detection is set to the grey on the back. If you're having a game like this, it's very important that your sprite has a very obvious front and back, and that they are in fact a little bit different. So if we start this game again, we go backwards, all of a sudden this back color here that's detecting is no longer touching grey, so when I press back the screen won't move, but I can still press forward because the brown on top of the head is still touching grey, which lets us go up. If I was, for instance, to walk into a wall and I was still detecting from the brown to go back, it would not let me do that either. It would lock in, but it will no longer let me go forward. But as I rotate around, all of a sudden that brown area is again touching the grey and I can walk. Because I've set it to just the grey, anything that's not grey, including this bed and this toilet here and this door and anything else, will stop the character from moving. So a good tip when you're having forward and backward movement is to do color detection, 1 for the forward, 1 for the backward, and lock it into whatever the ground cover is. Good luck.